So then, with that in mind, how do we get there? Paolo, we're right back.
You use the same picture.
Yeah, I used the same
That's not
picture
fair at all.
twice. That's not fair. But actually, this is the propositive aspect, which does relate to what we've been discussing in our manifesto. I think that accounting has to become, even in terms of financial statements and how we structure them, a space for questioning, visions, missions, purposes, notions of value, and so forth and so on. So unless accounting regains that ability of putting other things in doubt, it will lose its own legitimacy because it will become questionable. So one of the things that is happening with this. With this incredible belief in the notion of transparency and truth, is that while accounting in the past was a means to interrogate the mystery of an end, which could have been, your own morality in the Renaissance period, or your own ability to become part of a civic society in the Roman period, or the notion of value in contemporary capitalism. The fact that now instead accounting pursues this dream of truth makes the users of accounting question whether accounting can actually deliver that dream of truth. And of course we all know that accounting cannot deliver that dream, and therefore it loses legitimacy. Or if you cannot deliver the dream, why do I have to use accounting? I will use big data, another mythical thing that is emerging. So I think we have to regain that ability of accounting techniques and practices to throw the doubt away from itself into other things that could be, notional value, as Roger said, or it could be morality, or it could be purpose, or it could be other things.
Are there specific things we as individuals, I'm a junior professor myself, what can I do?
You're too junior, don't worry. You just discipline, you just do the discipline, you have to get tenure, you too. No, I'm joking. I think that, for instance, the important thing is to teach differently, for instance. Okay, so teach the accounting. We had this discussion yesterday with Mitch. So we have to convince the students that accounting is not that technique that will deliver neutral numbers which are actually so mechanically true that a big algorithm can provide them. Accounting is about judgment, it's about doubts, it's about institutions, it's about the conditions of possibilities for that truth to emerge, be shared, discussed. It's about deliberation. It's about many different things. And unless we show with real concrete accounting examples to the students that this is what accounting does, we have lost them. I'm also critical in a sense of the sociology of accounting, history of accounting, philosophy of accounting. What about accounting of accounting? In a sense, can't we actually develop these issues looking at the technique itself rather than using an external framework to be applied to a technique that seems to be there, mechanical, technical, and not integral to the way in which these social, political, philosophical issues are actually ingrained and intertwined with the actual technique. One last thing, and then I shut up forever, is that possibly also, and this is why the importance of students, possibly also the problem for the critical accounting discipline, or the beauty and the problem at the same time, is that it emerged thanks to the contribution of non-accountants, which was great at the beginning, but is no longer great now. If you want to change accounting, you have to know accounting. And you cannot do sociology of accounting if you do not know how accounting works. You cannot do history of accounting if you do not know how it worked. If you cannot do philosophy of accounting if you do not know how valuations work. So going back to accounting is actually a quite fundamental thing. And then you can do the sociology of it, then you can do the philosophy of it, then you can do the whatever of it. But accounting first.
Yeah. I'm sorry to make you break your word to us, but and how does that tie to the picture you provided?
Because you need to, you have that very famous matrix by Batchelor et al. That you mentioned this morning, Dean, with answer machine, ammunition machine, rationalization machine, and learning machine. What about maieutic machines? And so machines that provoke questions and instill doubt into the user rather than certainties. So that is what the question was.
Just because it fits right now what you're saying, when one said that accounting has no essence, how does that work when you say to do an accounting of accounting?
Accounting doesn't have essence in terms of substantial essence, but it is a procedure. And we need to know the procedure pretty well in order to understand how it doesn't have essence and how this essence has the tendency to become other than itself. So if you do not know the technique, you cannot discuss either the non-essence or how this non-essence becomes other essences, which is what Anthony also said in terms accounting has the tendency to become what it was not.
I mean, one of the things that's is the idea that's emerged. There are various kinds of procedures that are trans-institutional, of which accounting is one that's not linked to any particular substance, so to speak.
Roger, then, how should we achieve our goal? The future that we envision 10 years from now, how do we move from where we are to where we hope to be?
This is from the interior courtyard in the Detroit Museum, which is a fabulous museum if you ever get the chance to go to. Stunning museum. And this is a picture of an unborn child. Diego Rivera and Frida Kahlo were living across the street from the museum as the guests of Edsel Ford. And she had just lost a child. And this child is, to show the contradictions of this whole thing, this child is modeled, this infant is modeled on the infant of Charles and Anne Lindbergh, who had been kidnapped and killed. And you know that Ford was a right-wing fascist, anti-Semitic guy. And so it's not surprising that the Lindberghs were Lindbergh, who had received the highest honor from the Fuhrer himself, would be around. And so they used, so here you have these, these Marxist artists mourning the death of their child and putting this infant in this museum courtyard, which is quite extraordinary, which is about the dignity of workers under capitalism and shows very much their singularity. So this is a rather long wind-up to why I chose it. And the reason I chose it is because I think that what is being shown in this image is what is it? Well, first of all, what does it mean to lose life, and the way in which human life is at the ground of everything, and that it was the basis of Max Weber's sociology of religion, and many of our most important understandings of debt comes through the sacrifice of the Christ child. And so this sort of just the way in which the importance of bringing human life back into our accounts, that we have somehow lost human life as, you know, the most important metric of everything.
Jessup?
Roger's pictures are way cooler than mine. And his stories are tough to go. So being open. And that was the idea here, you know, for bridging this gap, this canyon. I think some of the things we talked about are speaking to each other, speaking to practice. I mean, I think that we are all cognitive misers, and we all have a limited capacity to process information, and so we get stuck in our particular area and the things that we do. And I think that limits avenues for publication. I think that prevents practitioners from caring about what we do, and perhaps prevents us from speaking to them in a way that they can understand. So, you know, very simply, I mean, to overcome that, we have to speak to each other. We have to be open to other insights, and be willing to embrace different points of view, and be willing to overcome, you know, our biases, or even be willing to work harder to integrate what someone else is saying and thinking into our worldview, and if we're going to move forward.
So, and those are all admirable things. Why don't we do them already? Do you have any thoughts on?
Yeah, because we're limited in the amount of time we have, and
We're just too busy.
so I think that it, yeah. So I think part of that said, I think we. I don't have a good answer.
Yeah, me either. I agree. I aspire to all of this.
But I mean, if anyone's going to do it, it should be us, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we should, despite it being difficult, we should take that on ourselves. And, you know, I mean, Paulo mentioned, you know, I'll do that after tenure. In the meantime, you know, you have to, you didn't say this, but in the meantime, you know, kind of play the game. And that's kind of true, and that's, at least that's, I think, maybe necessary to be successful to a certain extent. And so, and I'm not coming up with a solution still, but, you know, so okay, fine. So after we've received tenure, let's do what we can to help each other. And, yeah.
Yeah, it's something for sure.
Can I just say, Matt, look, and speaking to Jason, I was very surprised to see your name on this agenda. And so you are good to your work. You know? You are literally crossing the paradigms and, you know, and braving the field. It's, so it's great to see you here as well.
Well, I think it, so, and yeah, so I see value in being able to speak to each other, yeah.
My image is a really simple one. I think metaphorically we have to get off the train and get out of our comfort zone and somehow figure out how to act. And I think that involves being somewhat reflective in terms of how social change occurs and the role that accounting figures, broadly spoken, both in terms of accounting academics and accounting numbers and words, can participate in terms of bringing about that change. And I have no illusion that is an easy process. But again, with a sense of reflection, I've been in this game, in quotation marks, for quite a while, and I've heard the same discussions for almost 30 years in terms of we don't have enough time, the journal publishing thing requires us to do this, and all of these sorts of things. But the reality is we are hugely privileged. We live with inside the game. We have to do a certain amount to maintain our space, but after that, it's more or less human habit and maybe human laziness that we don't actually try to do something that makes the world a better place, myself included. So the drawing is basically meant to remind us that we have to be action figures in some form or another to actually achieve the goals that we speak every day when we talk to our students.
Great. And so if I were to ask you what specifically kind of must we do or must we not do?
An easy one. I mean, if we look historically, as I said previously, within certain genres, we've had these action figures that engaged in particular sorts of ways. That, you know, people like Christine Cooper, who worked with grassroots organizations, Prem Sika, who worked with MPs or wrote in the newspapers, who did those sorts of things. And they were somewhat effective in terms of changing the direction at a particular historical conjuncture of what was happening. The world has changed since that time. We live in this world of social media and big data and increasing professionalization. So those previous models might not necessarily work. But I guess most of us have the skills to think about what might work and through trial and error attempt to make a difference. And you know, there's no grand answer to these things other than basically acting.
Yeah, do something.
Yep.
Yeah. Martin, you had asked a question earlier. Have we addressed the question?
I think so, well enough.
All right. Coop?
So, yeah, I'm kind of, especially with being serious on pictures, talking about making the world a better place. So this makes me reflect, especially, you know, in the Canadian setting, we write SHIRT grants, and there's always a field asks you how to do that, right? Like, how do you society? And since I mostly work in the management accounting sphere, a lot of, like now I would say, well, you know, this helps improve organizations or corporations, and they in turn will improve society. So it's almost like it's conditional on the role of these big corporations playing, right? You know, and that's a debate already, right? It's, you know, how much they do. Because previously you have the Milton Friedman kind of view where you just generate profits and let the investors take the profit home and work on that. I think, you know, I struggle with that. Like, so is this, you know, do you see the role of corporations in society, like making that a better place, changing, eroding, you know, to the extent we're now doing public accounting, public policy accounting, how do we make a difference?
I see large corporations, and this might be heretical, but I see large corporations as simultaneously subjectifying us, but also being agents for change because they are so large. They have the voice of governments. They can introduce things at the margins like recycling or affirmative action and make a small difference. And, you know, so I don't see this as limiting us to studying certain sorts of topics. All it does is it requires us to be reflexive about how we think change is going to take place, and sometimes pushing our research in ways that might be uncomfortable for the sponsors of that research or the gatekeepers of that research.
Yeah, so to that point, I mean, there are organizations, right? It's like the review comment we made. They are us. We're the people inside. They're our parents, ourselves, our students. So.
Paul, you talked about engagement practice, which I think is immensely important. Do you think further thoughts on how we do that, or anybody, how we do that to make accounting more relevant?
I personally do it through teaching. And so I love teaching executives. But there are other ways. Can be done also institutionally. So personally, I sit on the thought leadership committee of AICPA CIMA, but I also sit now on the Financial Reporting Council advisory group for rethinking corporate reporting. Will these things lead anywhere? Are these rhetorical exercises? I do not know. Some of them are possibly, but we will see. But it is not by retreating in our offices that we will change the world. It's actually to get out there and trying to be heard. And as you say, we are all busy. We all have pressures of all kinds. But I agree also with Dean that we are quite privileged as well. we're still quite free compared to other kinds of jobs, and so we got that possibility. But if I had to say one thing, it's possibly seriously through teaching. So through teaching, we do make a difference, but we have to teach differently, though. This is our job. So, and I think in the last decades, couple of decades at least, there has been too much emphasis on research and less emphasis, at least in the UK, and less emphasis on teaching. You know, it is when the student leaves with. I remember David Cooper or Trevor Hopper, I can't remember, one of the two. I think it was David, who told me, you know, Paul, also my PhD supervisor, Claudio Libre, who said, you know, a professor professes. And so you go to the class, you profess what you believe. If you have convinced one person, that is a success. I'm happy very easily, one. You know, I don't need masses.
Great, well, let's close out with, oh, I'm sorry.
Can I just make an observation? At the beginning of the day, I said that I'm not an accountant, I never will be an accountant.
But now you want to be.
Now you're going to be.
I don't want to be an accountant. So I've been sort of, you know, the interlocutor, the outsider coming in, and so I just want to make an observation that a few things, but one of them is that you said, someone said that this is the only professional group, I guess, within a business school. And so in some ways you have the ear of more people and the legitimacy of more people than any other discipline in a business school. And then I am reflecting on, once again, this is just an observation, but this feeling of impotence that that you don't have as much impact as you could. That you feel this lockstep Pink Floyd thing that you're talking about, Paul, the, you know, this need to connect to practice, this chasm that you're talking about, Jesse.
Mm-hmm.
Those are irreconcilable to me. And I don't know why there's a belief that there is an empowerment of being able to influence or change. And I guess I'm having some dissonance around that. Yeah. This group, more than any other, has the ability, in fact, to influence change, influence society, be connected. Yeah.
The one area I found some limited success is in technology. And so the firms have come to us quite a bit and said, you know, we need you to educate people who can deal with big data and who can be a bridge between the traditional accountant and the computer scientist. And it hasn't been with all the firms, but there's one in particular that is open to receiving feedback. And so it's interesting because it's this perfect confluence, right, where the accounting firms, at least the way I understand it, they're still somewhat, they don't know exactly how they're going to use all these new analytics tools and big data. They know that they have to deal with it because their clients are, but they don't know how it's going to impact them, and they see it, one, as a tool to reduce cost, but two, hopefully to deliver more effective services. So they're somewhat open to receiving feedback, whereas I think some other issues they're not. They're somewhat set in their ways. And so even when we have something to say, that they might not be willing to listen. But here with this kind of new novel issue that's stirring them up, and stirring us up as well, because we don't have the answers either, we've been able to talk a little bit, and they're interested in what we have to say. And so that's been, to maybe bring a bright side to this, it's been invigorating.
So it's just extremely interesting. Tima asked us how we engage with the profession, and automatically you respond as like, you know, this is how we come with firms, that's it. But the firms,
Yeah.
I think they are the dominant actors in our profession, although they employ a small percentage of all the accountants out there. So that's really like, you know, it's basically that exchange kind of costs me the same. What is the role of our professional body in this? They often said they want us to engage with the practitioners more, but it seems like, you know, we're skipping over them, directly go to the firms. And why?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe to address Tima's question of I've been on the strategic foresight of the CPA Canada, so they try to think about the profession in 10 years. I'm not even CPA, I'm not Canadian, but I sit there. And there are a huge crisis. Like the profession, I think I wonder to what extent our scholarships questioning reflects the questioning of the profession in itself. I think the accounting profession right now is facing questions about the relevance, about what is an account. So they're talking about the intangible, like 75% are intangible. So I think the fundamental questioning of accounting as an agency between management and investors as your fairness, going is being completely questioned as we saw today. We're talking about visuals, aspects, non-financials, blockchain. So I mean the dualism of accounting, even like that, I don't think they're going to have debt and equity anymore. I think they're going to have debt, equity, ICO, like token, pure. I don't even believe they're going to have to the balance sheet as we did it. So I think our questioning probably reflects this as well.
This might be a really neat moment in time where, Paolo, you said a legitimacy of business school, legitimacy of accounting too, but that maybe we as an academic institutions have the ability to shape some of.
Or infiltrate into the cracks.
Yeah.
Because my comment to your indeed to your point was, yes, we are the only professional, let's say, the only profession within a business school, but that has got limitations too because it's very institutionalized. Mm-hmm. But now, given the crisis of the institution, there are cracks, and so I think we can try to colonize those cracks.
But a lot of resistance too. There's resistance from within the profession for conflict of interest. Tax people don't want to have any revolution because they make money out of it, and the partners are gonna resist. So I think this is also the goal of, I'm gonna discuss just after the last question, but I think this is also the goal of this space to provide a question and become action figures about what we do, because we are. Although we stay here and we look at the deaths and we just mourn, and then it's the planet and the climate change and what do we let to the next generations? Are we being empowered and fill the space? And so I try to get a bit of optimism here. But